Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Ahmad Fauzi, usually called Fauzi. I studied the State Islamic University of Maulana Malik Ibrahim Malang, Faculty of Science and Technology, Chemistry Study Program. My place of birth in Blitar, and I'm 19 years old. And then here I will summarize the 3 videos of environmental chemistry course. In the first video, the sampling strategy. The sampling strategy is to collect a certain volume of a water body to be studied with the smallest possible amount, but still can be representative and still have all the same characteristic as the water body. An example is taking samples of seawater, lake water, and others. This strategy is very important because the sample, when it is taken and has been used, the volume must remain the same so that it can be called valid data. Sampling is divided into 3 steps as follows. First, representative sampling. Second, transport and preservation of samples. And third, chemical analysis of sample, or the test parameters can be physical or chemical parameter of both. The purpose of sampling is the population is too large or the range is too wide, so that it is not possible to collect data on the entire population. Limited manpower, time, and cost. There is an assumption that the entire population is uniform so that it can be represented by the sample. Preparation of sampling and its preservation, and then bottles that will be used to take samples must be clean and have been rinsed with distilled water or distilled water first, then followed by the liquid that will be used to fill the water and dry if possible. And also make sure the bottle does not contain any contaminants from the previous analysis. This is because the analysis concentration is very small, so that there should be no trace of contamination from the previous analysis. The same also applies to sampling equipment such as pump pipes and others. They must be clean and contain no residue from the old sample, especially that crowd and of mold and mildew, because these fungus can absorb or reduce what we want to test. Contamination from metals or sampling equipment that can dissolve in the sample must be prevented. Bronze brass can be dissolved in acidic or basic water, so care must be taken of the metal, while plastic and rubber material can dissolve in industrial wastewater containing organic solvents, or oil and gasoline, for example, do not cause contains made of plastic or rubber if the sample contains organic materials or non-polar. Samples can be taken separately using a plastic or open glass bottle bucket and wiped, for example, by a lead ring around the neck tied with a rope and then put into a river, a well, and so on. Taking samples at a certain depth, a closed bottle is provided which can be opened when it reaches the desired depth. Another way is to use a type of pump the socks. This is due to avoid surface areas that can contain suspended solids. Samples from tap water can be taken with an open beaker or a bottle that will be closed depending on the analysis plan. Using an automatic sampler, which is special tool for consecutive sampling. The sampler automotive tool consists of the suction pipe depth of the sampling point is limited to about 5 meters under the tool pump. Clock to control sampling frequency. Tool for dividing samples into bottles for mixed samples. And isothermic sheet containing bottle of mixed sample is cooled by ordinary ice or dry ice, so that samples can be preserved no later than and day before being brought to the laboratory. This is because the air in the samples is lost, so that there is no change. There are also disturbances that may arise during the storage and transport of samples. Number one, gases such as oxide and carbon dioxide can be absorbed by the sample water or can disappear from the sample water into the air. 2. Suspended and colonial substance can form the awan VOCs and precipitation, so that one becomes different from the state when it was taken. 3. Like substance and liquids such as mud can float on the surface. And 4. Some solids can be oxidized by dissolved oxygen so that it turns into other compound. The method of preserving samples depend on the analysis to be carried out and the elements to be studied. Why should sample be preferred? Preservation at the sample can inhibit microbiological, chemical, and physical changes to the parameters to be analyzed so that they are stable within a certain time. And then in the second video, analyze contamination. Contamination is defined as the entry of unwanted compound into the sample during the surface pretreatment process and during analysis. Contamination is the presence of constituents, impurity, or the element that can damage, interfere, or make unfit material, physical objects, environment, workplace, and others. What causes contamination? Contamination can come from explants, or both internal and external. Small organisms that enter the media, such as ants, cultural bottles, or tools that are less sterile. Work environment and less sterile cultural rooms, like spores in the air. Source of contamination in samples can be from the atmosphere, apparatus, equipment, water, and reagents. Contamination from the atmosphere comes from the vertical trace elements. The simplest way to avoid atmospheric contamination of the sample is to cover the sample solution during the repair and analysis process. Contamination from the analysis operator can be a source of contamination of the sample to be analyzed either through the direct contact or through the air. Contamination of glassware is usually caused by the solubility of the container by the anticipated solution by washing the glass using a 1-to-1 mixture of concentrated sulfuric acid and nitric acid for storage should be immersed in a dilute solution of a less 0.1 meter hydrochloric acid and nitric acid when not in use. Other materials that have possible contaminants, for example fused silica, that possible of contamination from the material that have been absorbed by silica in previous use. Non-plastic that contain additives, then furthermore, Teflon can withstand temperature of 300 degrees Celsius and is inert to all reagents. PVC contains high levels of metal. Most of the plastic is contaminated by polymers such as zinc stearates on its surface. Rubber contains such as zinc oxide. Paper often contributes contamination because filter paper also contains various metal. Contamination from water to reduce metal contamination in water. The water needs to be passed first into the ion exchange resin column or at least to distillation must be carried out. The last video describes the contamination of reagents. Reagents can be useful for increasing concentration if our concentration is not what we want. The concentration of the reagent can affect if the concentration of the analytes from the environmental sample is very small and the average concentration is indeed small. The use of reagents is also create a chemical reaction because without a reaction there will be no reaction produced. Reagents are also intended for the purpose of testing and analyzing and chemical. Reagents are used as basic components developed in a research program. Contamination from reaction that can be grouped into two, namely number 1 mineral acid and ammonia. 2 mineral acid must contain certain amount of metal. Distinguished state with extra pure acid containing metal in very low levels generally have fairly experienced price. Ultra pure contain a fairly low metal concentration, but the content of some elements varies between products. Analytical reagents grade acids usually contain metal as listed in the table. To purify very small compounds by ultracarbon analysis, the acids are purified by distillation. Commonly used reagents are hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrofluoric acid. Ammonia solution in water placed in glass bottle will be contaminated with silica, aluminum, calcium, and cloud elements which might be caused by the attack of the alkaline solution on the glass. Analytical reagents of ammonia can contain heavy metal with fairly low concentration. This is probably caused by the desorption of these metal particles. Organic solids are usually unique enough to be directly without purification, but blank solution must be prepared. Dark or lead is an important metal in head series and is usually done by crystallization or filtration. The contamination can lead to loss of annelids. The factor of loss of annelid is the preparation and determination process or adsorption, which can come from the PPA container or equipment. Volatilization or evaporation and precipitation or precipitation that is shaking or adding acid. The following is an explanation of the summary of 3 videos in environmental chemistry course. More or less, I apologize if there is a wrong word. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.